Good evening, study partners. We are about to begin studying chapter 8, which is the final chapter of Tractate Shekalim. Tonight's class is dedicated in loving memory of my dear mother, Mrs. Rivka Newbort, of blessed memory. Perek 8 of Shekalim goes on a tangent, doesn't really discuss, or doesn't discuss at all Shekalim, really. It's not a discussion about Shekalim, but rather it's on a tangent, and it seems that it's a continuation of somewhat of the theme of part of the previous chapter. Part of the previous chapter discusses items that are found in Yerushalayim and what their status is. So if you find monies or shkalim in Yerushalayim, or if you find animals in Yerushalayim, so what is the status of those? If you find meat in Yerushalayim?
We started that last week.
So we spoke about that last week. So now, in a similar vein, we are going to continue, discussing the items that are found in Yerushalayim.
And this goes to tie back into the distance between if a shekel was found between the two boxes or whatever?
That was a precursor of those discussions.
Okay.
And that's how we got into the discussions that we just mentioned.
But
and now, once we got into that discussion, now we're going to get into this discussion. Let's see what the Mishnah has to say. Kol harukim hanimtzoim Yerushalayim tahirim. All spittle is spit that comes out of a person's mouth that's found somewhere, that touches somebody, or somebody touches it, is considered tahar in Yerushalayim, and this is the first opinion in our Mishnah. Now, this, of course, requires more information and clarification. What does that mean? What does this mean? Now, there are a number of people who are tomei, they're impure, they're ritually contaminated, and their spit, their saliva and their spit is contaminated likewise and has the ability to contaminate somebody else or something else. For example, a zav, a male who has a discharge that's similar to semen, or a zav, a woman who has a menstrual type flow, but not at the time of her menstruation, or a nida woman. So in all of these cases, such a woman or such a person, a metzora, for example, all of these people, when their spittle is also tummy and can make other people tummy. So now you you touch a wall, you lean on a wall, and you look at your hand, you wipe it off, you wash it off. But now the question is are you ritually contaminated? Obviously you got to wash your hands because it's. But now the question is what is the source of this impurity? Now, generally speaking, around the world, wherever you are, because most people in the world and in most places, most people are Gentiles. So Gentiles are all considered a zav with the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan classified all of them as a zav. It's not a Torah law, because from the Torah perspective, a non-Jew cannot be a zav, period. End of story, regardless of what happens with him.
However, do non-Jewish people also have the concept of ritual impurity?
Not really, no. But in this regard, they are considered like a Jewish zav, and that's their status. So now, spit, anywhere you go, we have to assume or presume that it's probably from a goy, or it's from somebody who is impure. So now, the question is, what about Yerushalayim? Is Yerushalayim the same as everywhere else? So the Mishnah clearly tells us in the beginning, anytime you're going to find spit in Yerushalayim, it's going to be considered pure. Why? Because Yerushalayim is mainly Yidden and people who are concerned with their tahara status. Chutz mishal shuk ha'elyon. This is all except for in the upper market. The upper market, as the Mefarshim explained, was a place where there were many non-Jewish launderers who would frequent this upper market. I'm not sure exactly what they sold there. Perhaps they sold items for laundry and laundering. So, because there was a lot of non-Jews there, so spit that was found there, we cannot assume came from a pure Jew, and therefore it's tahar.
Does a Zava need to leave the town like a Mitzvah?
No, they do not. Divrei Rabbi Meir. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yasi Eimer. Rabbi Yasi says, B'shor Yemei Sashana, all other times of the year, meaning to say, all other times except for the times of the regalim. Sheba Emtza Tmeya. All other times other than the festival times. Just take the chair from there. Just take that chair. All the other times from other than the festivals. So in the middle of the roads are tamei. Why? Because according to Rabbi Yossi, the majority of the people there are not pure. It's not a regal time. It's just people visiting Yerushalayim. Think about it today. How many thousands of people come in to Yerushalayim every single day? What percentage of them are pure Jewish people? So what's in the middle is tar, is tamei. What's on the sides is tar. Why? Because who would go on the side? Somebody who's going up to the Beis Hamikdash and wants to maintain their status of purity. They don't want to touch anybody, so they go on the sides of the road. However, in the time of the festivals, when the vast majority of people who are in Yerushalayim are people who are being Eila Regel, people who have gone through the process of purifying themselves to come to the actual Beis Hamikdash and do whatever they're going to do there, bring their karbonos, etc. So Sheba Emtza, whatever spittle is found in the middle of the road, tar is considered tar. But those who are impure, they don't want to contaminate anybody else, so they go to the side. Because why do they go to the side? Because they're few. And they go to the sides. And so therefore, this is according to Rabbi Yasi.
I have a question.
Yes.
Shoes are considered kalim?
Shoes are clothing.
But is it considered something?
Clothing are called kalim in general.
With respect to the spittle, can that cause you to be tamei if you step indirectly into spittle?
Well, that would be on your clothes, and your shoes would be tamei, and perhaps this is one of the reasons why you don't wear shoes on the harabayas. Kol ha'kelim ha'nemtzoim Yerushalayim. All vessels and utensils that are found in Yerushalayim. So now the question is what is their status? Are they considered pure? Do we assume that we find that somebody lost it and I found it? And now I have to question, is this considered ritually pure or impure? So it says the Mishnah, Derech Irida, Leveis HaTfilah Tmeim. If it was on the pathway that goes down to the mikvah, or the place where people generally table things, immerse things, so then it's tamei, because that's why it was found on the path that goes down to the mikvah. Derech Aliyah, if it was on the path that comes from the mikvah, tar. Shleiv derech yidirosan aliyasan, says the Mishnah, because the way down to the mikvah and the way up to the mikvah were two different ways. If you go on a roller coaster in an amusement park, you get in and getting out is not the same way. So apparently they had a similar system where you go towards the mikvah one way, one path, and you come up from the mikvah a different path. So when it's on the pathway down to the mikvah, we assume, why was it on the pathway down to the mikvah? Because it was tamei. Yeah. And the fact that it didn't get there means that it never got there. We have to assume that it's tamei. Excuse me. Divrei Rabbi Meir. So these are the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, if you find it on the way down, it's tamei. Find it on the pathway that it goes up, it is tahar. Rabbi Yasi Eimer. Rabbi Yasi says, Kulan tahirin. All vessels and utensils that are found in Yerushalayim are all tahar. Chutz min hasal, ha'magrefa, ha'amritza, ha'michodim lekvaris. According to Rabbi Yasi, he says any utensil, regardless of where it's found, is considered tahar. And what he says is that except for the basket, the shovel, and the spade that are used for digging graves, being that these are utensils that are meyuchad, they're special for digging graves, usually this is not something that somebody would ever tevel, that somebody would immerse and make pure. And so therefore, according to Rabbi Yossi, everything is tahar except for these things.
Halacha is like Rabbi Yossi.
Halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. That's correct. Now, we're going to move into the next Mishnah, Mishnah Gimel, which talks about a halacha that has to do with Pesach. Sakin shenimtzeis ba'arba aser. What happens if you find a knife in Yerushalayim on the 14th day of the month of Nisan? Now, sheikhin b'miyad, you can use it to slaughter your carbon Pesach right away. What's the b'shleisha aser? But if you found it on the 13th day of Nisan, sheinu matbil, you tavel it again. The kafetz umatbil. Period. So now let's understand and discuss this. When a person finds a knife on the 14th day of Nisan, this is Erev Pesach already. The person who lost it, presumably lost it now, recently. There's a lot of people there. If you lost it the day before, somebody would have found it the day before, right? And so therefore, the presumption is that it was lost today, and now I found it today. Doesn't have any special marks on it, so now I can keep it. Okay, great. So now the question is, can I use it? Is the presumption it's tahar or tummy? Now, the presumption here, what we're saying, is that it's tahar. Not only it's tahar, not only was it immersed in the mikvah, but we assume that it was immersed in the mikvah yesterday. And this is helpful because when a knife is immersed in the mikvah, you have to wait till sundown in order for to use it.
Is that a real thing?
That's a real thing. You have to wait when something is toveled, you have to wait till sundown in order to gain purity, not tovel for the toveling uses that we have today, but tovel for kachim, for purity's sake. So, just like a woman, if a woman were to immerse during the day, generally speaking, a woman is not to immerse during the day, but if she did, she would have to wait till the nightfall,
till she's
tar, because haravas hashemesh, you have to wait till Ma'ariv time, till the sun sets, and then it becomes pure. Now, during that time, it's in this quasi state. It's not completely impure because it was already immersed in the mikvah, but it's not completely pure because the sun has not set.
So if somebody
now the question is, if we find this, is it tar? We assume it's tar, and not only it's tar, but whoever was going to use it, assumably, we assume that they immersed it yesterday, and so now not only is it tar, but it's tar on the next day.
For kachim.
But if it's on the 13th day, we have to worry. But if it's on the 13th day, I find it on the 13th day, we have to worry that perhaps it wasn't yet taveled yet, altogether. Because maybe the person was going to tavel it right before sunset. And so therefore, because of that, we have to now, even though probably it was taveled already, it was already immersed, but we have to go and immerse it again, and then wait till the next day, and then we can use it.
The kafetz.
Kafetz. What about a meat cleaver? Bein bazeh or bein bazeh sheinu matbil. Both times, whether you find it on the 13th day or the 14th day, you have to tavel it again, you have to immerse it again, because it's unlikely that the person was going to use a meat cleaver to shecht his behemoth, even though you can.
You're allowed to?
You can use any item that's sharp and that doesn't have a tooth of sorts, can be used to shecht a behemoth. So anything. It
doesn't have to be a certain length?
No.
Really?
No, the Mishnah tells us clearly, in Chulin I believe it is, you could use any item. And so therefore a person wanting to use this meat cleaver to slaughter his animal, so now the question is was it immersed? And our presumption is that it wasn't, because that's not generally the items that you use to slaughter animals.
After it's used, is it tummy?
No.
If you
slaughter an animal, it's not tummy. No.
Even has blood on it?
Correct. You can use it. Yeah, that's correct. Now, Chol Arba Asar Li'es B'Shabbos, what happens if the 14th day
falls out on Shabbos.
falls out on Shabbos, and we already said that the shechting overrides Shabbos. We already discussed it in Masechtas Pesachim.
Then the 13th day is acceptable.
So then, shechet b'miyad, when you find it on the 15th day, obviously it was immersed yesterday, before Shabbos, and so therefore you can immerse it right away. So again, Chol Arba Saliyes b'Shabbos. If the 14th day was on Shabbos, so now it must have been.
Oh, we're talking about the kaifetz.
So now it must have been not the kaifetz. So we're talking about back to the utensils or the knife. So now he must have immersed it erev Shabbos. And now it's already Shabbos, and now
we're talking about the kaifetz.
We're going back to
the knife again.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're discussing what happens if this whole scenario took place on Shabbos.
Okay, fine.
So if the 14th day is on Shabbos, so when are we going to slaughter the Korban Pesach on Shabbos? When must have it been immersed? On the 13th. So therefore, shechet b'miyad. If you find it on the 15th day and you want to slaughter your Korban Chagiga or shechet b'miyad, or you slaughter it right away. Nimtzis kshura l'sakin. If you find a kaifetz tied to a knife, harei kasakin. So if the fact that it's tied to a sakin means that means the same way the knife was tabled, the kaifetz was also tabled, because he's going to use it afterwards to cleave the meat. Perek shenitmis bevlad atuma. What happens if a pareiches? Now we're talking about Tumah and Tara, Beis Hamikdash, and you see how the Mishnah goes on a tangent and veers off, and so we're going to go further, veering off even further. Pareiches that a curtain from the Beis Hamikdash that becomes Tomei through Avlada Tumah. Now let's understand what this means. Something that can be Tomei through Avlada Tumah. Normally speaking, things become tummy through an avatuma, through what's called a father of tuma. Things that are secondary of tuma, things that do not make other things tummy on a regular basis. However, liquids are a complicated exception, and so therefore, because sometimes it depends on how much liquid was there. It's a complicated thing. Again, we're not going to talk about all of those details now, but what we are going to talk about is that there is a gzera derabbanan, that liquids that become tamei, even from a vlada tuma, become now like an ava tuma, become a primary source of tuma, and so therefore, this is from the rabbi's perspective, from a rabbi's gzera, and so therefore, we can have a situation where a pareiches in the Beis Hamikdash becomes actually tamei from a liquid that is avlada tumah. So I'm just explaining how something altogether could become tamei from a secondary source of tumah.
So if the liquid changes its shape because it's frozen, does it still retain the tumah in it?
That's a very good question. We recently learned in Shulchan Aruch, we learned about this in terms of tumah and tara as far as washing your hands. Mm-hmm. And over there, it discusses that if once it congeals, it has the rule of a solid. Once it goes back, it has the rule of a liquid. I'm not sure. This is not our discussion here right now in depth. I'm just explaining how it's possible for a vlada tumah. We'd have to review, but it's a good question. But in any case, so now I'm just explaining how it's possible altogether for something that's tummy from a vlada tumah to go ahead and make something else tamei, and the way that is through a liquid if it's a liquid. So in any case, so what is this? So what's the question here? The question here is this is a pareiches from the Beis Hamikdash. It seems that we're talking about here the pareiches between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So what do we do with this now? So says the Mishnah, we immerse it in the mikvah that is in the temple courtyard complex.
The parochas?
The parochas, yeah, because now it became tummy, and now we have to deal with it. We have to get even though it's only on a rabbinical level, but nevertheless it needs to regain its purity. So we bring it into the mikvah in the complex of the Beis Hamikdash. And here's the point. Here's another point. You bring it right back in and you hang it right back up.
Now, who is allowed to do that? That's an interesting
We're going to get
question.
to that in just a minute. You'll see all about that. B'es shenitma'is ba'avatuma. However, that which becomes tome through a primary source of tuma. So says the Mishnah, matbilinaysa b'chutz. We take it outside the temple complex and we immerse it in the mikveh there. And then afterwards, now it's wet. We got to have it dry. And we let it spread out in the chel. The chel is an area outside, just outside the complex there. And again, I'm not going to go into detail too much. In Masechtas Mida, we're going to talk about, we'll bring diagrams, and we'll see all about the setup of the Beis HaMikdash. So for now, we'll just suffice it to say there was a place called the chel, and that's where they bring it to dry. And if it was a new one, and so it's really nice looking, they put it on top of this rooftop where underneath there was benches, so that the people can see the beauty of this parechis, and we're going to talk about the beauty in a moment. So the point is that when we have a fresh, beautiful parechis, and it becomes tameh, so the fact that we already brought it out, let's give the people an opportunity to and on the beauty of the parechis that was in the Beis HaMikdash. Masechtas Yoma, we talk about the parechis. We're going to talk about the parechis here as well. Parenthetically speaking, next week in Meretz Hashem, we're going to start Masechtas Yoma. We'll talk about that soon. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Mashum Rabbi Shimon ben Askan, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, the son of the deputy Kohen Gadol, he gives us the following facts. Parechis of Yetefach. The parechis that we're talking about here was a full handbreadth thick. Imagine that.
Whoa.
And it was woven with 72 threads. 24 threads
Within
on each thread.
Wow.
Orka arboim, its length was 40 amas long. Verochba esrem ama, and its width was 20. Umishmoinim ushtei riboy nasis, and it was made with 82,000. Now, 82,000 what? So there's three. Rav and the Rush offer three different explanations. A, that it contained a total of 820,000 threads. That's one. Two, second explanation is that it cost 820,000 dinars. Expensive. Three, that it was made by 82 young women. It took 82 young women to weave this parechis. And you ready for this?
Hold on a second.
It took 300 Kohanim. You asked before who handled this.
Yeah.
Kohanim, who are pure, of course, because we don't want to recontaminate.
But hold on a second. If this is the parechis to the Azara, between the Azara and the Kodesh Kodashim.
So there's two different opinions here, exactly where this was. But in any case, this was a big, beautiful, heavy parechis, and it took 300 Kohanim, no less, to carry it. And we're going to get more of these details in the next episode.
But I have one.
To toivel it, just to carry it.
You think about it, how heavy it would be when
After
it's
they
wet.
toiveled it, yeah.
Side question. Isn't this what was that thing that they had leathering and faces and images on it?
Proven?
What?
The images
Asas Chayshav or something like that.
Yeah.
So how would these women do it? There was only one person.
We're going to be talking about the parechis a lot more. Masechtas Yoma, which is coming up.
They got us excited.
It's exciting, and this is a preview. You have to come back. We can't give you all the information now because then you're going to say I know it all.
Okay.
So we got to get you back here. So Masechtas Yoma, we'll have exciting discussions about the parechis. So now we see how we get into one thing leads to the next. We start talking about things that become tameh. We get into meat of the highest holy order that becomes contaminated. This is according to the first Tana of this Mishnah. Whether or not it became contaminated with a primary source of tumah or a secondary source of tumah, how would it become contaminated? So bein b'fnim, bein b'chutz, whether
Got contaminated
from from the inside, but whether it became
Contaminated.
inside the temple complex or outside the temple courtyard. Beis Shammai says, Hakol Yisaref Bifnim. All of it is burnt on a fire inside the temple complex. Chutz, except for a scenario, Mishenitma Ba'ava Tuma B'chutz, something that became Tomei with a primary source of Tuma, which is not a rabbinical thing. It's a serious primary source of Tuma, and it was outside, so we leave it outside and we burn it outside. This is what Beis Shammai says. Beis Hillel says, Hakol Yisaref B'chutz. In all scenarios, we take it out to be burnt. Chutz, except when it only became impure with a secondary source of impurity, and it was already inside. So being that it was only a secondary source of impurity, and the item, this meat, was already inside the temple complex, so we don't take it out, we burn it inside. Rabbi Eliezer Eimer, where Rabbi Eliezer mixes into this argument.
Rabbi Akiva.
No,
Rabbi Eliezer Eimer. Rabbi Eliezer says, whatever, he has a different opinion. Whatever became impure through a primary source of impurity, bein b'fnim, bein b'chutz, whether it took place inside or outside, yisaraf b'chutz. We leave it outside, but we take it outside and we burn it outside. But Sar Kodesh Kadoshim, the holy of holy, the holiest order of meats that became impure through a vlada tuma, bein b'fnim, bein b'chutz, yisaref b'fnim, whether it was inside or outside, we take it from the outside. Even if it's outside, we take it and we bring it in. How much more so if it was already in the first place inside the temple complex that we burn it there? Rabbi Akiva, another opinion. Rabbi Akiva says, "Mokem tu mosei sham sreifasi." Wherever it became impure, that's where we burn it. Okay, ches. Evrei hatomid, the limbs of the daily.
Just 1 second.
Yes.
And the burning is for sacramental purposes.
No, the
No,
burning
this
is
is
because
to
it
get rid of
became
it.
impure.
so
It cannot be
it's-
eaten.
okay.
Can't
And
throw
since
it
it
out.
can't be eaten, we have to burn it.
But it's not burnt in sacrifice.
Evrei hatomid, the limbs of the korban tomid. This is the daily offerings that were brought each day, bein arbayim in the morning and in the bein arbayim. So nitonim mechatzi keves ulamata. So they were placed. The limbs were placed from half the ramp and below on the western side. V'shel musafim nitonim mechatzi keves ulamata b'mizrach. The musaf sacrifices, the limbs were placed on the altar on the bottom half on the eastern side.
No, Ivaria Tamid Nizam Mechatzi.
Right.
That's correct. One is on the east side, one is on the west side. One is on the first one is on the west side, and the second one is on the east side.
That's not what we have here.
That's what we have here in the Mishnah. So
Okay.
We gotta tell.
Maybe turn it the same way the rabbi has it.
I'm in enough trouble. I'm
it
sorry.
send a
Yeah,
listen.
now it's
What do you
right.
think?
Now it's right.
This is the Kahati app.
L'shel musafim netanim v'chatzi b'mayrev. Yeah, it's the opposite. I think that's incorrect. Anyway,
I'm gonna snapshot.
yeah.
Good catch, Alan.
Now, so that's the Tamid and the Musaf offerings. So those were lower on the ramp. However, V'shal Rashi Chadashim, but the limbs of the Rashi Chadashim, Nitanim Mitachas Karka v'Mazbech Malmata, was a bit higher, and it was under the halfway line, which again, although we're still using the term below, it is above the area that the previous two were placed. And the reason for this is that people should be able to see it. It should be a difference, because it was super important for people to know when Rosh Chodesh was. You couldn't just look at a calendar. We all know that it had to do with the testimony of witnesses when they saw the new moon.
Light the torch.
So, being that we wanted to make a bigger deal of the Rosh Chodesh, because a lot of big important things, differences are taken into account because of this. So it's placed a bit higher on this ramp. Now, I believe this is the only mention. Not I believe, but this is the only. Only two times we're going to mention Shekalim altogether in this Perek, and it's also in a roundabout way. Hashkalim v'abikurim Ein noigim ela b'fnei habayis. Shkolim, this mitzvah of giving shkolim, and bikurim, bringing the first of the fruits to the Beis Hamikdash, ein noigim ela b'fnei habayis, are only done and applicable, and we only do this process, fulfill this process when there's a Beis Hamikdash. Aval meiser dogon, but giving tithing your grain, or meiser behema, and tithing your animals, abcheres, and the laws of the bechor animals that are used as a carbon. All of these rules and mitzvahs are fulfilled whether there's a Beis Hamikdash or not. However, if a person is magdash, a person goes and says, "These shkalim is for my shkalim," or bikurim, or he takes bikurim and he says, "These are bikurim," hareze kodesh, they have sanctity to them. Rabbi Shimon says, "Haimer bikurim kodesh." He disagrees with this. He says, "Haimer bikurim kodesh." If he says that these bikurim are kodesh, einam kodesh, they're not kodesh. If there's no Beis Hamikdash around, then the process doesn't begin, and so they're not kodesh. And so, mazel tov, we have finished now our second Masechta, Masechta Shkolim, Siyata Deshmaya. Next week, we've been mentioning this all night. Next week, in Mirza Hashem, we're going to start. Just a little plug. Masechtas Yuma is one of my personal favorites. And the reason why it's one of my personal favorites is when you learn it, you have such a feeling of being in the Beis Hamikdash. It gives you a visual, and it's just exciting to recognize and know that Mirza Hashem, very soon Mashiach will come, and we'll see not words of the Mishnah, but the words of the written in the Mishnah, but coming to life. So please join us again next week at 8:30 for an exciting new Masechta, Masechtas Yuma. Good evening.